44 companies of the JSE Top 40 have an ADR program, and 60 of the top 110 companies on the JSE have an ADR program, which is fantastic because US consumers then have access to South African companies, but South Africans and South African investors don't really have exposure to US companies via this program.
Correct. Not yet.
Not yet. In that context, give us perhaps a definition in terms of understanding American depository receipts slightly better.
Yeah, DRs is, you take the letter in front of the DR, American Depositary Receipt or Global Depositary Receipt, and you drop it off for the purposes of the discussion. But DRs in general are an essential part of the capital markets, and they're not very well understood by many market participants. Essentially, DRs are a security that make something foreign look like something local. So in the case of American depositary receipts, it takes Goldfields or Anglo Gold or Sasol, allows them to list on the New York Stock Exchange. Yeah. And instead of having to buy them in Rand on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange during the hours when US investors are asleep, you can buy them during New York market open hours in US dollars.
In US dollars, and of course it takes away a lot of the cost that one would have to incur if you'd have to delve into another market.
If I purchase ADRs on the New York Stock Exchange, I pay $8.95 to my online broker, whereas I couldn't do that if I bought Johannesburg-based shares.
So what's quite exciting at this point is that a lot of emerging market companies would then obviously list as a depository receipt in the US. Now we've got a Toronto-listed company, First Quantum Minerals, listing in Zambia.
And that's really the wave of the future. It's pretty exciting. First Quantum obviously has significant assets in Zambia. And as part of their commitment to the country, they wanted to list on the local stock exchange. And again, when you cross a border with any equity security, generally the depositary receipt is the mechanism that makes it work really well.
And it's going to, of course, be in Zambian kwacha as well. It's quite a fascinating thing because we've got a lot of companies that are listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange and that operate on the African continent, and there has been quite a bit of pressure to list locally and obviously embark on a dual listing. Do you think this is a very good alternative for a lot of these companies that don't want to have a dual listing?
Well, I think the world is globalizing. There's absolutely, positive proof that that is happening in many countries around the world, and it's important as companies expand internationally to show their commitment to local markets. So Standard Chartered is has a big presence in India, and last year we did an Indian depositary receipt for Standard Chartered. A company called Valley out of Brazil, a big miner, has interest in Hong Kong. They have a Hong Kong listed depositary receipt. So more and more of that will happen.
What's also quite fascinating when you look at the Lusaka Stock Exchange or even many of the stock exchanges on the African continent, the JSE All-Share, there's very low liquidity. That's been one of the big issues. What kind of liquidity would we see for this ADR?
It's going to be small to start.
Or DR, rather.
Yeah, it's going to, thanks. It's going to be small to start. The U.S. equity capital markets are by far the world's largest. They've got about 60% of the value that trades every day globally. The rest of the world is catching up from a much smaller base, but the thing that's exciting about it is the volumes are increasing at a much faster percentage rate than the U.S. market is. And that's where the excitement is.
So we can expect a decent volume that would come through for First Quantum's depository receipt.
Slow at first, growing in the future.
Okay. Also looking at some of the other work that you're going to be doing, you're looking at Namibia and Botswana as well. What kind of trends can we foresee there? Which companies are interested in doing this?
Again, it's going to be mostly resources, banks, and maybe telecoms. Those are always the first companies out of the emerging markets to come to the U.S. markets. The U.S. consumers really have a choice. The U.S. market isn't growing fast. European markets aren't growing fast. They're really looking for growth in order to meet their pension obligations or other obligations that they may have. And Africa is a great place for them to
So we don't currently have a depository receipt that's listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange.
Correct, but we're working to change that.
The first African depository receipt actually came through for Zambia.
Correct.
That is quite exciting. But there seems to be demand and appetite on both ends because the US wants more exposure to what we see on the emerging market space, and Africa obviously wants exposure in a very cost-effective manner to what is happening in the developed world.
Correct.
So when you say that you're going to be working with Namibia and Botswana, are we looking at synergies occurring both ways?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the options for the other African companies are coming here to Johannesburg and doing a SADR, or alternatively going to the US markets to do a level 1 ADR. So the options are open for all of these companies, and ideally they're listed in multiple jurisdictions with DRs, keeping their home listing in their home market, which is important, and having multiple DR jurisdictions.
But why for First Quantum, why not list in Zambia?
Why list in Zambia?
Why not list?
Well, they did list.
Well, officially list and actually have a dual listing as opposed to just embarking on a depository receipt.
The issue with a dual listing is the actual back office settlement flow. It's very difficult for you to have shares in multiple markets. When you do that, settlement times lag. There's a couple of stocks listed here in Johannesburg that are dual listed and don't trade and settle as international investors would want them to.
So when can we expect this to happen in South Africa?
I'm saying next year.
Next year?
Yeah.
Fantastic.